Hello, everybody!
We're back, listeners. Did you miss us?
We are back.
The FTF podcast coming at you. One of the top, let's say, 5 podcasts focused on the greater fantasy genre in the greater Atlanta metropolitan region. Right?
Wow, I feel like that is a really bold claim.
Completely based on no stats, really, except our Podbean account, laying you behind the curtain.
I'd say we're maybe in the top 100.
100? There aren't enough fantasy podcasts, I would think, to
Well, I don't know how many
even
exist.
have to go that high. I mean, and we're talking Georgia, or Atlanta. So we're going even more narrow. We're huge in Georgia based on our Podbean account, so.
Yeah, that has nothing to do with the fact that I live in Georgia and am testing on a bunch of devices, on a bunch of different platforms and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine that most of it is all of you listeners. So shout out to all our Georgia listeners and any of our listeners around the world, really.
Shout out to all of our listeners. Thank you for being you. We really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, and we're happy to be here to be able to speak to you all. I mean, I think maybe we should start making some changes to adjust to how big our listenership is in Georgia. Like maybe have a little more of a southern feel to things. I feel like you'd be the expert since you live there, Charles, but I just want to give the listeners what they're looking for.
Absolutely. We could do like a southern drawl, talk about aquariums and peaches and Coca-Cola and Chick-fil-A, all the...
You know what's up over there.
All that Atlanta culture.
Yeah, well, also shout out to my brother who lives in the Atlanta metropolitan region, but has not been to the aquarium yet.
That's a bold move.
Like, what are you doing?
And he's been there it's not like he just moved there. He's been there for years, right?
Yeah, I don't want to get it way wrong, but he's been there long enough. Long enough where it's time to get over to
I was
at
the aquarium within 2 months of living here, so there's no excuse really.
There was a conference that was in Atlanta a couple years back that I missed the first day, but the event that day was an aquarium visit, of course.
Nice, of course.
Yeah, and my buddies went, and they really liked the aquarium. There's whale sharks or something over there, Charles?
There's multiple. It's got one of the biggest tanks in the world, certainly in this hemisphere, and it has, I think, 3 whale sharks in it, amongst other gigantic fish. It's pretty impressive. It's a cool place. If you're in the area and you haven't gone, I would highly recommend it.
Well, I imagine that a lot of our listeners are in that area based on those Podbean stats that I was referring to before. So all you Atlanta listeners out there, check out that aquarium if you haven't already.
Please do. Something else interesting that happened around here, more specifically to me, I didn't get to tell you, the other day I was driving home and I have a hatchback, and in the trunk I have a...
Humble brag.
I have, yeah. You know me, my
Just
2007 Subaru that I drive around.
We're both Subaru drivers, Charles. It's just I have a sedan, and you're just flaunting that extra space.
Well, I do love it. The car's a piece of junk, though. So I have a fire extinguisher in the trunk just because the car is so old and junky that I feel more safe with the fire extinguisher in the trunk.
Like you're worried that the car could spontaneously combust at any time?
Well, it's just really old and rusted, and it's not long for this world. It's really high mileage, so I had a fire extinguisher just by living life, so I just figured I'd just keep it in the trunk. It's not like I went
What do you
out and
mean
bought
you
it.
had a fire extinguisher by living life?
Just
I've
in
been
my
living life
many
too. I don't
adventures,
have a
I
fire
just ended up
extinguisher.
with the fire extinguisher, and I didn't know what to do with it, and I was like, well, I'll just leave it in the trunk of the car. That's not the point of the story.
I have to imagine the story of how you acquired a fire extinguisher is more interesting than the story you're telling
It's
now.
really not, I
But-
promise you. But if you want to
okay.
hear the prequel of the fire extinguisher, basically back when I used to...
We'll save that for a bonus episode, Charles.
If the fans demand it, I'll go tell the prequel
Yes.
of how I obtained a fire extinguisher. But the poor fire extinguisher, I was driving home from work and I hear just like the sound of a pin pulling. Like I hear a ting and then a
Oh,
whoosh, and my whole car immediately fills up with this like smoky, ashy like dust. And I'm like, I can't see, I can't breathe.
Oh, no.
I
Seriously?
had to pull over. Thank God I was on the highway. I was just like in a I was like so close to being home. That's another thing. I was like a minute away from not even being in the car anymore. And it just went off and it literally filled every nook and cranny of every exposed area. Like you would push a button in the car and there would be dust like in the cracks of the button. It was a huge nightmare, and it was like in my hair and all over my stuff. It was all over my phone.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to be laughing, but it is
No,
a funny
it's-
image.
it's
And
a funny
seeing you
story.
here and
I
knowing
mean,
you're okay.
Yeah. No, I was totally fine. It was literally like it went from hearing that ting to not being able to see anything in seconds.
Oh
That's ting, shh, and I was totally blinded.
Well, Charles, I'm glad that you're taking these precautions to stay safe, like keeping a fire extinguisher in your car.
Yes, that is the ultimate irony that it was the fire extinguisher that made it very not safe to drive. So for all you people driving with fire extinguishers in your car, make sure they are firmly
And there
fastened.
are dozens of them.
I mean, it's a good idea. You should do it. Just
Is
make
it?
sure it's
Are
firmly...
you just gonna stand by? It's a good idea right now.
It's not a bad idea. It's better to have it and not need it than the other way around. You know?
I feel like after your experience, maybe it's better.
Well, what
not
you need to
have
do
it.
is just make sure it's secure and strapped down and it's not going to roll around, because that's what happened. It got loose and it rolled around when I made a turn, and then the pin came out, and it was a total disaster. And I spent my whole weekend cleaning the dust out of it.
Ugh.
So I'm still finding dust, like in my backpack even. Like, open the zipper and dust will just come flying out of it. It's so annoying. It's everywhere.
This is tragic.
Very tragic.
So in the future, you're just gonna strap it in with a seatbelt or something. Once
I
you-
just
once you
think I'm
get
going to
one.
let the car burn.
I'm with you. That was kind of my plan. Is if my car ends up on fire, I didn't really have a contingency plan for it. I'm just kind of like, I guess that's how I go.
I'm just going to walk away from it at this point. But, yep, rest in peace, fire extinguisher. And if the
R.I.P.
fire extinguisher was your favorite character in the story and you want to hear more, we can do a prequel. You just have to write in to the FTF podcast at gmail.com.
Yeah, write a review. Give us a 5-star review,
Yes.
of course.
That's a requirement.
Write a review and compare the amount of casualties in this story to Game of Thrones, either positively or negatively.
Mm.
So
There is
at
a
some point
beautiful
say-
poetic irony in it that, it's good. It's
that you tried to keep safe, and it was the fire extinguisher. Like
Yeah.
all these safety precautions end up being dangerous.
Yeah, it was a big character moment for me. So
I think you learned that sometimes you can be so cautious that it's dangerous.
so true, man. And that was kind of my arc, my story arc, being
Yeah.
confronted with that and then having to clean it. And now I'm here talking about it. We're looking back on it, laughing, and that's just kind of the final moment of the arc of the fire extinguisher
Yeah.
incident. So I'm glad to have
throw
that
us
closure.
review, say it's no Game of Thrones and use that, much like many of the reviews that we've read before in our review of the reviews segments. Say it's no Game of Thrones and say that there were either too many deaths or not enough.
Yes. Then that's how you leave a very constructive review.
Yes.
Well, we've got something new we're trying out today. We're looking forward to it. It's going to be very exciting. We're going to play a little game of Would You Rather
Heyo.
Fantasy Edition. Should I say fantasy books? Fantasy.
Yeah, maybe
high fantasy.
We're going to keep it clean on the FTF podcast today. It's not going to be that kind of Would You Rather game.
So
it's going to be just some good, clean fun about fantasy novel related stuff. Fantasy series, maybe.
That's right. We gave ourselves a pretty loose structure for what kind of questions we can ask. They just have to be along the theme of fantasy. So, who's going to go first?
Charles, would you rather go first?
Whoa,
or should I?
I mean, if you're okay with it, I can go first. Shake things up.
I just asked that. It went over your head. Maybe you're still lightheaded after all the fire extinguisher fumes.
I breathed in stuff I should not have breathed in.
Would you rather?
Oh,
Heyo.
That did go over my head. I did. Yeah. And they weren't fumes. It was literally like particles. And you're definitely not meant to breathe in it. But would I rather? Sure. I'd rather go first. Why not?
Do it.
So, as all of our longtime fans of the show know, my boy Dylan is a big fan of Abercrombie and his books.
People know that about me.
Yes, if anyone's listened, they know this.
There's a lot of conversations like that in Georgia.
Absolutely. Everyone's talking about it. So, what I wanted to ask you was, Dylan, would you rather have a 1-hour private interview with Abercrombie or be written into the next Abercrombie book of your choosing as a character?
It's an interesting question.
Thank you.
Am I a main character?
You can be whatever kind of character you want. Your ideal situation.
All right. Well, here's what I'm gonna go with, Charles.
Okay.
I'll take the hour interview. First off, that would be such an honor, and I'd get to actually spend time with Abercrombie, and I think that can't be passed up. And I'd have to use it for the FTF podcast because is that fair game in all this?
Yeah, I would hope you would, but you certainly don't have to. You know, you can like go for coffee or something.
Yeah, and presumably it's just me, right? It's not you. So in this case, the friends are me and Joe.
It's more like it would be your ideal situation. So
okay, so you aren't there.
I guess not.
Just me and Joe kicking back. Okay. Well, I'll take the interview. And I think what I can do there, too, maybe this is cheating. I can see if I can use that as a platform to also get him to write me into one of his stories.
Well, I would applaud your effort for trying, but this is kind of like an either or. It's like never meet the man, but get written into a book, or get the interview, but never be written into his book. It's basically kind of like a prosperity versus a individual sort of experience.
Yeah. I think the stipulations are fair, and I'll still take the interview just because, getting to actually spend time with Joe Abercrombie would be really cool. And I feel like if he wrote me into a book, I would have to come to grips with the ways in which I'm kind of a shitty person. Like, Abercrombie is not going to write you into a book in a way that is particularly generous to your character.
It's not going to be the way you expect, and probably not the way you would necessarily want.
But it would probably be on point.
And it would be
So
good.
it'd be good, and I'd have to really take a sincere look at myself after. And I mean, I don't need that. So
Don't need that close of a lens.
You know, that's what therapy's for. So I think instead I'll just choose the interview and give me a chance to get to know the man a little bit better. I think it'd be a really good time. And
That's fair. I would probably choose the same thing. I was thinking about it. You gotta go with the interview over the book thing is nice, but it's all about the personal experiences, you know? You get more out of meeting and talking to people than reading your name in a book, you know?
yeah, it'd be cool.
For sure. I mean, it would be a huge honor, but if you had to pick one.
Yeah. I feel like I would actually rather be just more of a cameo appearance than a main character in a. It just feel weird to read a book where I was an actual main character or something.
Right.
But to just have an appearance by some character named Dylan that's based on me and some random part of a book would be kind of fun.
Yeah, Logan Nine Fingers could butcher you or something. That would be a big honor.
I'd love that. Joe, if you're out there listening to this, please write a short story or something where Logan Nine Fingers kills me.
It wouldn't be that hard. Logan
Nine Fingers to kill me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it'd be much of a fight. I think I'm closer to Forley the Weakest.
Weakest.
Yeah. He was in the initial crew. I know
Right.
It's been a while since you read the first law, but
It's a deep cut. I like it.
yeah, deep cuts coming from the Marshman.
That's right.
All right. Well, are you ready for one from me, Charles?
Lay it on me, bro.
Well, I think I went a somewhat similar route in terms of going with one that's tailored for my friend. This is Friends Talking Fantasy, after all.
That's true.
And I went with one that was very Charles specific. So those
I'm excited.
big listeners, people who've been following us since the start, most of you probably in Georgia. Georgia's been going wild talking about how Charles loves Lord of the Rings.
Oh, yes.
And those of you who've been listening also heard us mention that we climbed Mount Doom in New Zealand.
Yes, yes.
And Charles, did you find climbing Mount Doom to be an enjoyable experience?
There were many aspects of it that were enjoyable and a few aspects of it that were very, very not enjoyable. So it's kind of I would do it. I would go through it again, but
really, you would?
I would maybe bypass the specific hike up Mount Doom. You know, there's a trail that goes kind of around it.
We're talking when we literally climbed up the
That was a bad decision. I would need to do a lot more training next time before I would do that again.
Okay. So my memory of it, and this is a tease for listeners, at some point we'll do a couple story time episodes where we get into this trip more, and we'll get into the Mount Doom climbing. It's called Mount Nagaruho, or I hope I'm saying that right. In
Close
New Zealand.
enough, but
They'll be able to figure it out. And the thing that we got, I think in our first ever episode, we said, Charles, that you almost died during that. And
it's true.
We'll just leave it at that and let the listeners
have to stay tuned.
Demand that story with the same vigor that they'll demand the fire extinguisher story. And my question because I remember you not having a particularly good time when you almost died climbing Mount Doom, is would you rather never read Lord of the Rings again or with no preparation starting tomorrow have to do the entire Mount Doom climb by yourself, full hike?
The full 14-mile thing or whatever it is.
Well, I think that was just the way around. I mean, including actually
that whole
the,
hike, like the whole crossing, the Alpine crossing, all of it, including the mountain,
including climbing to the top of the volcano and back down, and then finishing the hike.
Oh gosh!
So I don't know how many miles that all was, but the hardest part was scaling the volcano because of it was
right. So
rock climbing.
There's a place in New Zealand called the Tongariro Alpine Crossing, and it's normally like a 10-hour hike, but then you can also do this add-on that's you climb a mountain was used for many scenes in the movies as Mount Doom, right? So, of course, us not knowing what we were getting into, we're like, well, we're all the way here. Of course, we're gonna go up this mountain. And it's like we're going up
too much of the story, Charles.
I don't want to give away too much of the story, but man,
the story, save it. Just people should know it's they can look it up themselves.
It's a great story.
A freaking volcano.
Yeah, and it's all scree, and it takes at least 3 hours. I think it took us more because we're not just mountain climbers.
The climb and the hike took us probably 14 hours, right?
Yeah, around that.
It was all day.
For sure. Man, I gotta just take the hike again.
Wow.
The real issue wasn't me; it was other people on the hike dropping rocks down on me. So, although I may just barely be able to physically complete the hike, at least I won't almost die.
No, when I said by yourself, I meant like Derek and I aren't there. I don't mean the whole volcano is.
So it's still possible for people to loose rocks above me?
It is still entirely possible for people to loose rocks above you.
Well, it's not like you guys helped me at all.
That's not true.
Besides moral support, you weren't like...
Derek warned you... I don't want to get into the story because we're saving it. Derek warned you about that rock and told you to move.
Well, yeah, I guess that part is true.
Oh, yeah, we only saved your life. But it's not like we helped you.
You just pointed out. I was the one that had to dodge it without getting too much into the story. But the point is I'm physically capable of doing it, albeit just barely capable. So it's not like I'm putting myself at that great of a risk. I mean, it was such an amazing experience. That was the one stain on an otherwise absolutely amazing day. And
Charles, I cannot wait until we do this story with Derek because he will be there to affirm how miserable you were during the entire hike. I mean, except maybe like the very beginning. Because you've got these rose-colored glasses about how you think that hike went.
Well, I'm not saying I was in a good mood. I was in a poor mood after that, for sure. I had no idea what we were getting into. And it was scary. But you're talking about either that, which is something I've already done, and it's possible, or never reading Lord of the Rings or again. So I would still take the mountain again.
Okay.
Hopefully I would have some time to get in better shape, work on my quads.
Nope. It was tomorrow.
Oh, God.
Yeah, you have to do it tomorrow.
I would still do it.
Hey, it's amazing what you'd
Look, I'm not saying it's going to be easy or anything like that, but it was certainly it is a once in a lifetime experience. It would be,
And you've already had it once, which is why the second time is like you're not really gaining much by doing
no.
it a second time.
But think about how much I'm losing by not being able to read those books.
That's fair. I mean, I'd rather maybe this will get me some hate, but I'd rather never read Lord of the Rings than
Then you really
climb
wouldn't
Mount
do it
Doom
again?
tomorrow. Tomorrow?
Yeah.
I have no interest in ever climbing Mount Doom again. Charles, I guarantee if you actually did this, like 8 hours in, while you're just trying to scale this volcano without tumbling to your death, you would be regretting your choice.
I don't doubt it, but I'm not saying it's going to be fun, but it's like one day of suffering just so that I can continue to read whatever I want is worth it. And most of that hike is really beautiful. It just kind of gets dampened by the fact that you get destroyed by this mountain.
Yeah, I mean,
if you go around the mountain, it's all quite enjoyable.
I think around the mountain, I would totally. And it's a volcano, Charles. Around it, sure. I'd be happy to do that anytime. It's the actual climbing up it and then going back down that was ridiculously dangerous.
Yes,
and I have no interest in doing that part again.
I would never willingly do it again, but I would rather do that than give up one of the most famous fantasy trilogies of all time. As a fantasy podcaster, I need to be able to access those books.
That's fair. I mean, I'm just saying I personally would. I don't love Lord of the Rings with the same fervor that you do, Charles. So maybe if it were a different series, I would.
Well, you would have to read the books first before you pass judgment. But yeah, if it was something like you couldn't read Game of Thrones or First Law or whatever, you would go up the mountain.
I'd have to think it over.
Really?
Dude, and I had a better time. Not that either of us had a good time doing it. I think you had a worse time when we were doing it than I had, like climbing the volcano. I remember this as being like a really rough experience. I don't want to.
I mean, I remember not being able to use my legs properly for days.
Well, there's that picture of you that looks like that picture of you where you're trying to walk, but you're so sore that you're taking these like huge, weird-looking strides, and you look like that famous picture that's supposed to be Bigfoot. Yeah. And then I created that like side by side of it. You remember that?
Was that you or me that created that?
I created that.
Okay.
I was saying when I first took the picture, I was like, "You look like Sasquatch." And Charles, for the listeners who don't know yet, Charles is a pretty tall dude. Can have a little bit of a lanky look to him sometimes. It's a pretty funny picture. So
it is, and I'm like coming out. We're in. I don't know. I don't remember if we were in Rivendell or not, but we were in like the woods. So he got me coming out of the woods.
Yeah.
So it looks exactly like that famous black and white Sasquatch photo.
Yeah, and there's a side by side of those that I'll find that and I'll have to post that.
That is a great picture.
Yeah. All right, Charles. So I guess you're climbing Mount Doom. I think I would do it for First Law.
What about reading like Winds of Winter? You'd give that up to not have to climb? Doom?
I mean, well, yeah.
It's the whole series.
I would have to I would have to do it for Song of Ice and Fire just so I can read the new books when they come out. But those might be like the only two that I would. I don't know. There's a few. Like I'm really enjoying our King Killer read. Like
it's been really great.
So that'd be in there too. There's a few I think I would do it for. Yeah.
Okay.
I think Game of Thrones, why I was thinking maybe not, would be because there's still the show, and I feel that about Lord of the Rings too. It's like there's still the movie, so if that's not being banned, you can still get a lot of joy out of
Yeah,
those.
that's true. I mean, it's been a really long time since I've read the books anyway. And I'm not risking my life by not reading them. So, but I mean, you just can't. I just may as well suffer for a day to get to not deny myself those books, especially as a fantasy
you,
podcaster.
like 7 hours in about how you're feeling about your decision.
If anything, just the desire to spite you at this point would be enough fuel to get me over the mountain.
I think a good would you rather for me is, would you rather have an hour-long interview with Joe Abercrombie or an hour-long interview with Charles while he's in the middle of climbing Mount Doom again for the right to read Lord of the Rings at some point in the future?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You would be so lucky. Well, that was a good one. This one, mine is not so much this or that. It's kind of, you have a lot of options. So,
Charles, do you know how would you rather works?
I do, but I'm broadening it here because there's no benefit to bringing it down to two choices. So,
Okay.
we had just finished, as everyone knows, we just finished reading Mistborn. Okay. So, one of the things that exists is a misting, and I was wondering, Marsh, if you could only burn one elementic metal, which one would you choose?
It's interesting. I think, you know, the psych part of me at first started wanting one of the emotional manipulation medals, but then I was like, oh crap, like that's actually messed up. Like that's should not want to.
But isn't that what
manipulate
you're
people's
trying to
emotions.
do as a therapist? is
As a
to
therapist? Yeah, well, that's part of what I'm
soothe and
thinking,
riot
right?
the
It's
right
like,
emotions?
so part of what you learn in the Mistborn trilogy is you're not giving people new emotions. You are either bringing ones they already have more to the surface, or like quieting other ones, but you can't like make people feel whatever you want them to feel. And I feel like part of what I do in my work as a therapist under the supervision of a licensed psychologist as a graduate student, make sure that's all above board and how I'm portraying myself. I feel like some of what I am trying to do is bring people's emotions to the, like certain ones, I guess like a rioter, like bringing the ones that need to be
Inflaming
brought to the
certain emotions.
surface to the surface.
Hmm.
So I think that's, I'm going to try to think through the rest so I'm not overlooking one that would be way better. But I think if just like my life is continuing as normal, like I'm not in the Mistborn universe, right? I'm just
Right.
still me.
You're still
Like,
you
so I'm
in
just like,
modern day. The only thing is now you are a misting, and you get to choose what kind of misting you are.
I think as a therapist, the only one that would be useful for me in day-to-day life would be one of the emotional ones. So I think I'd want to be a rioter, I guess, to try to help people bring out the emotions that are there, but like get the ones to the surface that are concealed a little bit more. So I think that would actually be very useful for my day-to-day life. Like,
Certainly.
like I'm gonna do party tricks where I push coins around or something?
Yeah.
Like, what would being able to push or pull coins would be kind of fun, but like you only get one, so you can't do the cool
Right.
flying stuff that.
So true. Without both, it's not cool at all. You need
Yeah.
both so you can fly around.
I think maybe, and bronze and copper are completely useless, right? Like, because there's
Completely.
no other allomancers in our modern world. So me being able to hide that I'm burning something doesn't do anything, and me being able to like sense that other people are burning also doesn't matter at all. So those are gone. And then there's like pewter would be super strength, which
Yeah.
like I don't know.
Not just super
It'd be
strength, though. You're talking about increased endurance. You're talking
yeah,
about like healing faster. You're talking
true.
about all kinds of other things. Like for me, being a pewter arm would be a huge. That would be my pick. I think just be so badass.
Yeah. I think I'm gonna switch to pewter as well, even though the other one makes me feel a little messed up. Like the idea, I don't know why. A if it's, I do know why. I don't think that I should have superpowers as a therapist. I should probably just be a normal person, and then pewter would let me climb Mount Doom if I ever had to.
That's right. You would
For
scale it
yeah,
no problem
yeah,
with pewter. Yeah, pewter. And then I thought maybe like tin would be cool, but pewter's just better than
yeah.
tin.
Pewter's better than tin. So I think
So,
yeah, pewter. It's got to be pewter. I mean, I could imagine how good at tennis I'd be.
dude, you'd be so good at tennis. Your serve would be out of control.
I know. I could probably go pro.
I would hope so, considering you'd be the only misting in the entire planet. You should be able to do something incredible
Yeah.
with those skills.
All right.
And I feel like
Pewter it
also in
is.
the books, pewter was by far the most used on all the writing, besides maybe steel and iron together.
Yeah. It was definitely the one that seemed to make the most sense if it were by itself. I mean, I think those and the emotional manipulation ones are most useful. And tin, I guess, but I mean,
You
I
could
don't know.
do
What am
cool
I doing
stuff
with
with
my.
tin. Like I'd be happy with tin, but I would choose pewter every time.
Yeah. All right, pewter.
Pewter,
You heard it
pewter
here
arms.
first.
So what do you got for
All
me?
right. Well, I also went with a Mistborn themed one.
Ooh,
So, but luckily it's different. I was thinking at first maybe I would do a would you rather with like Mistborn powers versus some other superhero power or
I
something.
had the same thought.
But then I thought, that's not that interesting. And then I was like, oh, I could ask about which kind of misting he'd want to be, but I wouldn't be able to do that because of the constraints of would you rather.
You got to broaden your mind of what's possible.
I guess I'm too rigid, right? If only I were flexible like you, Charles.
Dude, you
It
are
looks,
the host of the show. It's whatever you want it to be.
yeah. Well, I feel like you're the host and I'm the face.
You're definitely the face.
So then I have one that's maybe a little more grounded in reality.
Okay.
It's would you rather play a really well made Mistborn video game
Ooh.
or watch a really well made Mistborn movie?
No, that's a tough one.
Right?
I think it would make a terrific. We've already said this. It was in episode 1. We said it was written like a movie, and we've already talked about how cool a game would be. I think I would rather to go with the movie because to me, movies are just more impactful. They're more, in the popular culture world, and I feel like video games after a few years become obsolete, whereas movies tend to live on, especially good ones. So, and I mean, Mistborn was just written to be a movie. As much as a game would be excellent, I mean, I would really love to play it. I gotta go movie because I want to
That's
see.
fair.
I want to see the story. You know, I want to see the performances and all the action. And while a video game would be cool, I would much rather go into the narrative and all those twists and turns and reveals. And I would be
Well, a good
very
video
interested to
game,
see
I
it.
think, can do all of that.
Yes,
I think
it
I've played
can.
some games that do all of that. Like these Final Fantasy games and stuff like that have, I think, done a really
Yeah,
good
there's like
job of having.
Uncharted that's very like narrative focused.
Yeah.
And I mean, even
So,
The Witcher games do a great job of telling a ton of story, and they're based on, really popular fantasy series also. So I know
yeah.
it's possible, and it would be excellent. I just feel like a movie's more timeless, and I would get more enjoyment out of it, and be able to share it with others more than a video game necessarily.
That's fair.
And I
Unless the
only
video game
own
is
a Nintendo Switch
multiplayer.
anyway, and I don't know if it's made for the Switch. It would probably be a PlayStation or Xbox situation.
Well, it's assumed that you get to play it. So the question was framed that you get to play it.
Yeah,
I think that, but movie makes sense. I think when I first thought of the question, I was leaning toward movie as being better for similar reasons. Like I like what you said, that they're timeless and they make this impact. And at least for me, I don't really replay video games, but I do rewatch movies. So I think those kind of things make a movie really appealing. The hold up for me was how much more content you can get, or like really just how much more hours of entertainment you get from a good video game than from a movie. Like a good movie is probably max 2 hours. You're done with it. But a
yes.
very good video game can entertain you for literally for days. Like for
I mean, people log hundreds of
48
hours into
hours or
games over their
whatever is not, yeah.
lifespans, so
Yeah, or like like the Final Fantasy games I mentioned. It's not unusual for the total length to be over 40 hours. So I was like, I don't know, I'd get a lot of good fun out of that. And a good story mode would be awesome, but also imagine like a battle royale style
yeah, that would be
game where
sick.
people have different powers, or maybe everyone's a Mistborn. I don't know what would be in there, but I think it'd be a lot of fun to play that with friends. So I think I don't know. I maybe would pick video game.
It would be a
It's
good
not my
choice. I
natural
mean, there's no
inclination.
bad answer here. They're both if because you said in the question that they were going to be good, right? Like
Yes,
so
well made either way.
so a well-made Mistborn game has a lot of potential. It's just it would be really hard to make something that's good, but if we guarantee it's going to be good,
Yeah,
then that's would be a great experience. So I don't blame you for like it's a difficult choice. But I don't know, I've just been thinking about it as a movie for so long, and they're going to be becoming reality soon, hopefully, and I'm just excited. I think they were made to be action movies, so I'm excited to see them.
yep.
And see more good fantasy movies out there in the world.
That would be great, and I think that's pretty key too, right? If Mistborn has a lot of success as a movie, which is likely if the movie's really well made,
Right.
then it could catalyze some more fantasy movies.
Right.
So you got to think about that impact too.
Absolutely. And I just think, movies have a wider audience than video games do. So if we're talking about just like the greater influence of fantasy on popular culture, then a good movie would certainly have a bigger impact. And I'm all about that impact.
Yeah. Well, I feel good about our conversation around that one. I think it's fun to think about because I would love to have either of those things.
Me too. Okay, I have another Would You Rather here. And again, there's more than 2 options, but there's 3 options this time, as opposed to 14 in the other one.
I can't believe I stuck to this form.
It's good. I mean, I have some that do, but I have one last Mistborn one, and I think it'll be a quicker one.
Okay.
Who
I
would
just
you?
feel I.
Oop.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Come on, don't get all hurt
I'm
because
just being.
I
I guess
stretched
it's that I was too rigid about it, and I think we all learned a valuable lesson.
No, I think you did a good job of keeping it grounded and everything. I mean, we'll see. We'll let the people decide if this is too off the rails. But who would you rather be stranded with on a desert island? And you have three options. Option 1 is Ham. Option 2
I
is...
mean, should I just say Ham right off the bat?
Well, you haven't heard the other choices yet.
I mean, but it's going to be hard to beat.
Option 2 is
Ham from
Spook.
Mistborn. Oh, okay.
and option 3 is Dachshund and Clubs as a duo.
Dachshund and Clubs.
Yeah.
What a package deal.
Yeah. So that's something to consider, because at first I was like, well, Ham's an obvious choice, but having another person could have its benefits also. So that's your choice: Ham, Spook, or the Dachshund Clubs duo. Desert Island, stranded. Deserted
well,
Island.
let's just get rid of Spook off the bat.
Wow, you're gonna do Spook like that?
I mean, what benefit would there be to having Spook over? Okay, let me just speak to why the others are useful.
Okay.
And then just leave the fact that I don't have anything to say about Spook to show how useful I would imagine him being in this situation. And for the record, I'd be the most useless of any of these people presented in this scenario, but they're stuck with me. I'm there in all of these. So Ham's like strength and endurance and things like that mean protection. I don't know what's on this island, but I mean, even just things like chopping wood for fires or whatever we'd have to do. I have no idea. I have no survival skills. But I imagine all of those things are things that Ham would be extremely well equipped for.
True.
So he'd clearly be very useful. I mean, he could pewter drag to get across the island really quickly to see if, I guess, in this hypothetical, it is deserted, but we wouldn't know that
right
at the time. So I guess we'd want him to do that. There's just a lot of things I would imagine.
He could move rocks and logs and things like that.
Yeah. So I think Ham has just very clear utility.
For sure.
Oh, but does he have access to pewter is actually key here.
That's a good question. I didn't consider it. Let's say he has a vial of it and that he had on his person. I don't know how much pewter he carries with him on his person at any one time, but...
Well, let's just give me, like, how many days before he runs out pewter, assuming he's, like, using it at a
as you know, it depends on if he's flaring it or not, and pewter is one of the faster burning of the elementic metals.
He's not doing a lot of flaring. He's just kind of using it when these things come up.
So I would assume you get to the island and he's got whatever's currently in him, which wouldn't be much, and then he's got a full vial. So at any time he can digest the vial, and once you digest it, you have to use it. And I don't know how much that would give you. Let's say he could spread it out to like a week.
Okay, I'm going Dachshund and Clubs then, because. So Dachshund was always portrayed as this guy with a ton of organizational and maybe not leadership skills in the way of someone charismatic like Kelsier, but leadership in the sense of actually taking charge of things and understanding what the best decisions
and he was very organized and very clinical and all that good stuff.
Exactly. So I think Dachshund is an underrated person to have in all of this. So I think Dachshund would be really important. Clubs, I think, at least we've got an extra person around. I mean, again, Clubs would, I'm sure, be way more useful than me. He has some fighting experience and all of that. But
he's got a pretty level head, too. He's not going to, break down on anyone and stay practical.
I think so, too. So I think the extra company to have 2 people instead of just one with me. You don't want to be stuck with Ham and all of his philosophical puzzles.
Well, I would
That's not gonna
say
get
that's
us much of
something,
anywhere.
to pass the time. You may want to just have these long conversations with Ham to pass the time versus, I mean, have you tried to ever have a conversation with Clubs? It's not easy.
I think he'd warm up to me eventually if he was willing to warm up to Breeze. I just feel like I'd be more concerned about finding a way to survive than finding a way to entertain myself. And I feel like Dachshund is going to be the key. If it's going to be a long-term thing, that's the guy you want with you.
Would it change if he had maybe like a month's supply of pewter?
I think if it was a month, then I would probably take Ham. Yeah.
Okay. And you wouldn't take Spook at all, huh? He could like spot ships or something.
And do what when he sees one?
Light a fire.
Yeah. I don't have much to say about Spook and all this. Spook is also like the person I'd least want to be around of. I mean, not that Clubs is someone I'd particularly want to be around, but I feel like Dachshund's a guy I could get along with. So, yeah, Spook.
Okay.
Yeah.
What if it was Ham with 2 months supply of pewter, or Spook, Dachshund, and Clubs as a trio?
Now you're talking here. And Spook has how long before he runs out of?
3 months. Same with Clubs. Not that it matters.
Well, yeah, Clubs will be able to to shield people from knowing that Spook is burning.
He'll hide the one signal that might help get discovered.
I feel like, well, the Spook Clubs duo, I mean, they have a real connection there. I feel like...
Yes.
And now we're talking about 4 people.
You could move
altogether.
logs and stuff without the need of one pewter arm.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And I think I'm going with that because I think we need Dachshund's. We need Dachshund's head here.
Dachshund was always the guy that made things possible. So.
Yeah. I feel like if we're going to get off the island, Dachshund's our best shot. And now that we've got a couple other people here with us,
that's fair.
like we can do some of that manual labor that we'd want to.
All right. Do you have any more for me there, buddy?
More would you rathers?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Don't you worry, Charles. I stole this one from someone online.
Okay.
A Reddit user named One Johns, and One Johns linked out somewhere else for this. So
wow, the rabbit hole goes
One
deeper.
John's original, yeah, but that link was broken. So I'm sorry, whoever originally came up with this, but I couldn't find out who you are. And I modified it a little bit. One John's had it as would you rather be a Jedi or a wizard, but I felt like what a wizard is so variable.
Yeah.
That I went with would you rather be a Jedi, obviously in the Star Wars universe, or a wizard of Hogwarts training in the Harry Potter universe?
Oh man. Well, Jedis are badass, and when you're talking about being in the universe, so you have access to lightsabers, and Jedis are like elite tier people in the Star Wars universe. There's only a few of them, and they're like insta leaders, the most influential people in the galaxy. So that's pretty cool. But a wizard at Hogwarts with Hogwarts training. And I'm not anything special, huh? Just as good as I could do on my own caliber.
Wait, so
if I graduate Hogwarts, I'm just going to be another run-of-the-mill wizard? Or am I going to be like a Dumbledore era, a Dumbledore-esque wizard?
It's like anything else, you get what you give to some extent,
boy.
like depending on how hard you work
Yeah.
your time at Hogwarts. But we're not assuming you're like a legendary. In either case, you are not like a legendary person in all of
They're
this.
both badass, but I'm going to probably go with wizard just from the sheer amount of stuff you can do.
Yeah.
You got to go wizard. There's so many more possibilities
too.
in Hogwarts than there are in the Jedi Temple.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to attract some hate by saying you have to be Hufflepuff, though. Make it a little harder.
With my boy Cedric Diggory, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
That's my second choice after Gryffindor.
Really?
Yeah, I don't need to bother with those other houses. If I'm not Gryffindor, then I may as well just chill out, you know?
That's fair. I always felt like I would have been in Ravenclaw.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people say. For me, it's like I'm either Gryffindor or nothing.
Well, yeah.
Obviously the best house.
So,
undisputed.
Okay, so you'd be Hufflepuff. Then
that's fair.
I felt like Hufflepuff was for people who don't really have. This is. Yeah, I'm just gonna leave it there.
There is like a phrase, but it's mostly for just people that are there to chill out, which I can relate to on some level.
That's fair.
Okay, well that was good. I mean, I would love to be a Jedi.
Oh, Charles.
Oh,
the Jedi Order has some pretty stringent rules that I feel like.
Oh, I'd have to be like a legit Jedi, part of the Jedi Order.
Yeah.
Oh, no way. Then Hogwarts all the way.
Okay.
I could be snogging people and stuff.
Snogging. Yeah, the Jedi.
Can't snog anyone.
You can't get snog.
No.
All right.
Was there more to that?
No, that was that.
Cool. Because I couldn't remember if that was what the person had said, and then you spun it. Oh, they said wizard. Yeah.
They just said wizard, but they didn't.
It's got to be more specific than wizard.
Yeah, like what? Like Merlin, or like there's a big difference between Merlin and a Hogwarts trained wizard.
Yeah, a Hufflepuff trained wizard. Even.
But everyone knows what you mean when you say Jedi.
That's right. All right. Well, as we all know, Marsh is a PhD candidate, and something he can look forward to later on in his career is taking a sabbatical, which is something that many professors do in their careers. So, would you rather take a 1-year sabbatical in Middle-earth or Westeros?
Oh, dude. Westeros is such a place to be. Why would I ever want to go there? I like Game of Thrones. Personally, I've always enjoyed Game of Thrones more than at least what I've seen of Lord of the Rings, which is only the movies so far. I know. But where we will be buddy reading Lord of the Rings, and I'll catch up. But I just feel like Middle Earth presents a lot more opportunities to not have a existence.
Very true.
I guess it's just a sabbatical. I just feel like, am I making it through a 1-year sabbatical?
You're doing your best. It's not guaranteed.
Okay. You gotta go Middle Earth, man. I feel like I'd be able to find somewhere to hold up in Middle Earth where.
For sure. I think life in Westeros is terrible for 99% of people. Even most of the nobility, life sucks for them.
Yeah. So.
Is there a place that would be more tempting to do your 1-year sabbatical?
Than Westeros?
Well, then Middle Earth, I guess.
I'd rather do my 1-year sabbatical. Oh, then more tempting than Middle Earth.
Middle Earth is a pretty sweet one.
What if I could? I mean, we were just talking about Hogwarts, right? What if I could spend it as a visiting professor there?
Oh, yeah. I would sooner go to Hogwarts than Middle Earth also. Just because it sounds so insane. So much magic and cheery fun times.
Yeah. I feel like I don't know. Trying
Dude,
to
I
think
should
of
have
what
picked two different
worlds
schools, like universities. I wasn't
you
thinking.
could have done. The university in Kingkiller and
Yes, and then there's also like
Hogwarts.
Hogwarts. There's where all the Craysters are, or whatever they call that place in Game of Thrones.
Yeah, well, instead of, I would not want train to be a maester or
No.
anything. Instead of wanting to do a sabbatical somewhere, you could have done like, where would you rather be a professor? Since those are
Yeah,
my career goals, and then done
that's right. Once you
Hogwarts
get that
or
PhD, you're going to be applying for work, and
Hogwarts might come calling.
Hogwarts. I don't. They could really use a therapist in Hogwarts.
That's probably that's probably where my abilities would be better put to
You would be
use as a
very
therapist
busy
there than
there.
a professor. Like, well, can you teach the dark arts? Like that's pretty much our opening here. And I'm like, no, most of my training is in like counseling psychology. And they'll be like, look, I think what we need from you is to just talk to this Harry guy. He's been through a lot. He needs he needs a nice figure like you in his
Or
life.
anyone really. Just think if there was a counselor when Voldemort was in school. It would
Yeah,
be a very
could have
different.
turned his life around.
You could have turned his whole life around.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we've been less interesting books with a mentally healthy Voldemort, but
True,
yeah,
but it would have been a happier one.
true. Yeah.
Are there any more you would like to share, sir?
How about? Would you rather read? Okay, let me give you a little more of the premise. The premise is that an author is given someone else's book to read and then told to do a rewrite of it in the same way that like we get these remakes of all different movies, right? Same way
Okay.
that they I don't know why this came to mind first. I'm sure there's lots more recent than this, but like they remade King Kong with
Right.
Jack
There
Black.
are more recent than that.
But people get what I'm talking about.
Right, like all these Disney remakes of like Aladdin, and
Yeah, sure. And
they remade Willy Wonka.
exactly. Any of those. Just that idea, right?
Okay.
That's someone else's vision, but the basic premise and characters are likely to be mostly the same.
Okay.
Would you rather read Lord of the Rings by Joe Abercrombie
Okay.
or The First Law by J.R.R. Tolkien, assuming that Tolkien was around to read it?
The first one, I would want to, which is pretty much what I feel like First Law kind of is in many ways.
In some ways. But we're thinking like he's actually writing like Frodo and things like so you get like how Joe Abercrombie imagines Frodo.
I think
So-
Lord of the Rings would be interesting to have a more contemporary take on it, where not everyone is so perfect and virtuistic and has the best of everything at their disposal. I would be interested to see a little more nihilistic approach to all that, which Abercrombie would cut to the core of it very quickly. So I would definitely choose that, because I feel the other one was having Tolkien write First Law.
Yeah.
I don't even know if Tolkien would get it. Like
I think he would have to he'd have to reframe it into this more like good versus evil thing. So we'd have like this hero Logan Nine Fingers with no flaws, and like,
versus
things like,
like
that.
the evil I guess.
Yeah. Well, that's a spoiler. That's a huge spoiler, actually. We might want to cut that because we don't even give a spoiler warning.
Oops.
We'll cut that. We'll pretend. Yes, we would get the really, really heroic version of Logan Nine Fingers, and versus some sort of evil lord or something like that.
Yeah, that just wouldn't be as good because the whole point of that book of First Law is to not be that. So definitely the first one. Let's see what he can do with the classics.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I'd love to know how Joe Abercrombie would write Frodo. I feel like we've covered
we covered a lot of ground today.
Yeah.
Well, everyone, that was our first round of Would You Rather Fantasy Edition. I hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you so much for listening. This was a lot of fun. Just remember to if you're going to get stranded on a desert island, make sure you bring your mistings with you. They will be helpful.
Bring a fire extinguisher.
Leave that
you
at
just never know when one of those will come in handy.
Well, with that, I'll bring out the outro music. And thank you all again for listening. This has been another exciting episode of the Friends Talking Fantasy podcast. Coming up next week, we are kicking off our buddy read of the Kingkiller Chronicles. It's been really fun to read this book for the first time, so I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well. Make sure to follow us at the FTF Podcast 1. That's the number 1 on Twitter. Also, email us at theftfpodcast@gmail.com. Search for us on Facebook and I guess Instagram, which I don't really know how any of that works. But
it's at the FTF Podcast for all social media except Twitter. And check us out on Apple Music and Google Podcasts and Spotify.
Yeah.
Well, thanks.
Tell them what to do, Charles.
I will tell everyone what to do. Have a great day and go forth and conquer, friends.